Question 441. The following are requirements for the forming of an easement by implication. A. It must be necessary for the enjoyment of the property. B. There should be an obvious prior use. C. Both A and B. D. Neither A nor B. Correct answer is C. Both A and B. An easement by implication arises when a property is divided, and a prior existing use of one part of the property was obviously and apparently used for the benefit of the other part before the division. For an easement by implication to be created, courts typically look for the following elements. A. It must be necessary for the enjoyment of the property, easement by necessity. While some jurisdictions distinguish between easement by necessity and easement by prior use, necessity is often a key factor, especially for easements implied due to the division of a single parcel. The necessity doesn't have to be absolute but should be reasonably necessary for the convenient and comfortable enjoyment of the property. B. There should be an obvious prior use, easement by prior use. Before the property was divided, there must have been a use of one part of the property for the benefit of another part that was apparent and obvious. This prior use indicates that the parties likely intended for that use to continue even after the division. In many jurisdictions, including California, creating an easement by implication requires two key elements. First, the easement must be reasonably necessary for the enjoyment of the dominant property. Second, there must have been an obvious and permanent prior use of the easement area before the property was divided. Question 442. The holder of a note secured by a trust deed and entitled to the performance of all provisions in the trust deed is the A. Truster, B. Beneficiary, C. Trustee, D. Mortgager. Correct answer is B. Beneficiary. Trust deed. A trust deed involves three parties. 1. Truster, the borrower who signs the note and trust deed, pledging the property as security for the loan. Corresponds to the mortgager in a mortgage. 2. Beneficiary, the lender who provides the loan and is entitled to repayment. They hold the note and are the recipient of the truster's obligations. 3. Trustee, a neutral third party who holds the legal title to the property until the loan is repaid. They have the power to foreclose on the property if the truster defaults. Therefore, the beneficiary in a trust deed holds the promissory note, making them the creditor entitled to receive payments and the fulfillment of all obligations outlined in the trust deed. As the lender, the beneficiary is the party to whom the debt is owed and who gains security from the property encumbered by the trust deed. This security interest protects the beneficiary's investment in the event of default by the borrower, truster. Question 443. FHA insured loans. A. May be assumable. B. May never be assumable. C. Are limited to 1% of an applicant's income. D. Are no longer made available to veterans without at least 5 years of military service. Correct answer is A. May be assumable. FHA insured loans originated on or after December 15, 1989, may be assumable by qualified buyers. Whether they are veterans or not, subject to the lender's approval of the buyer's creditworthiness and ability to repay the loan. Loans originated before that date have different rules regarding assumability. FHA loans do not have a strict limit of 1% of an applicant's income. Instead, they focus on debt-to-income ratios and residual income to determine affordability. Veteran eligibility for FHA loans is not dependent on a minimum of 5 years of military service. VA loans, a different type of government-backed loan, have specific service requirements for veterans. Question 444. A house's second-floor balcony jets out from the building into the airspace of the adjoining property. It is called an A. License, B. Easement in gross, C. Encroachment, D. Fixture. Correct answer is C. Encroachment. A license is a temporary, revocable permission to use another person's property for a specific purpose. It's not a physical structure extending onto the land. An easement in gross benefits a specific person or entity, not a particular piece of land. While an easement could be granted to allow the balcony to overhang, the question describes the physical structure itself, which is the encroachment. An easement would be the legal right allowing the encroachment to exist. A fixture is personal property that has become so attached to real property that it is considered part of the real estate. While the balcony is attached to the house, the issue is its extension onto a neighbor's property, not its status as part of the owner's real estate. An encroachment is a physical intrusion onto an adjoining property. In this case, the second-floor balcony extends beyond the property line and into the airspace of the neighboring land, which constitutes a physical intrusion. Question 445. Tenant Tom has a year-long lease expire, but wishes to stay in his apartment. So, he continues to send rent checks to his landlord. Until the landlord moves to evict Tom, A exists. A. Tenancy at will. B. Tenancy at sufferance. C. Tenancy in common. D. No tenancy exists, the lease has expired. Correct answer is B. Tenancy at sufferance. A tenancy in common is a form of co-ownership of property where each owner holds an undivided interest in the property. It is not related to a landlord-tenant relationship after the expiration of a lease. This type of tenancy arises when a tenant who legally possessed the property under a lease remains in possession after the lease has expired without the landlord's consent. The tenant is essentially holding over unlawfully. In the situation described, tenant Tom's year-long lease has expired. His continued occupancy and sending of rent checks do not automatically create a tenancy at will if the landlord has not explicitly agreed to his continued occupancy. Until the landlord takes action, either accepting the rent and thus potentially creating a tenancy at will or taking steps to evict, Tom is considered a tenant at sufferance. Distinction from tenancy at will, the key difference lies in the landlord's consent. A tenancy at will is created by the express or implied agreement of the landlord to the tenant's continued occupancy after the lease ends. A tenancy at sufferance exists due to the tenant's unlawful holding over without the landlord's agreement. Question 446. An appraiser would use which of the following for a comparative market analysis, CMA? A. Current listings. B. Homes recently sold. C. Listings recently expired. D. All of the above. Correct answer is D. All of the above. A comparative market analysis, CMA, is a tool used by real estate agents to estimate the market value of a property. It involves analyzing several types of data related to similar properties. 1. First, the real estate agent gathers detailed information about the subject property, including its size, condition, features, and location. 2. Then, they research comparable properties, focusing on those that are similar in characteristics and have sold recently, typically within the last 3-6 months, in the same neighborhood. 3. Adjustments are then made to the sale prices of the comparable properties to account for differences between them and the subject property, e.g., size, number of bedrooms, bathrooms, upgrades, condition. 4. Finally, the agent compiles this data into a report, providing a price range or estimated value for the subject property based on the analysis of the comps. By considering current listings, recent sales, and expired listings, a real estate agent can provide a more comprehensive and realistic estimate of a property's potential selling price in the current market. Question 447. A lessee was given a 30-day notice to terminate a periodic tenancy by the landlord. However, the lessee failed to vacate the property at the end of the 30 days. Which of the following is now true? A. There is a tenancy at sufferance. B. The landlord could begin the ejectment process. C. If the landlord accepts and cashes the tenant's rent checks, then a new periodic tenancy would result. D. All of the above. Correct answer is D. All of the above. Once the 30-day notice period ends and the tenant fails to vacate, the tenant is now occupying the property without the landlord's consent. This creates a tenancy at sufferance. Since the tenant is now unlawfully occupying the property, the landlord has the legal right to begin the ejectment, eviction, process to regain possession of the property. If the landlord accepts rent after the 30-day notice period, it implies consent to the tenant's continued occupancy. This action effectively creates a new periodic tenancy, based on the frequency of the rent payments, e.g., month to month. Question 448. Berry Bros, a strawberry farm, agrees to sell all the berries it harvests to Smoothie City, a company that makes non-fat smoothie drinks, if Smoothie City promises to buy all the strawberries it uses from Berry Bros before signing the contract. Berry Bros asks to insert a term that it can cancel the agreement at any time without notice. A. Valid, because both parties agree to the terms. B. Void, because Berry Bros' promise is illusory. C. Void, because it violates the UCC. D. Both B and C. Correct answer is D. Both B and C. If Berry Bros can terminate the contract without notice, it means that they have not limited their options for the future. So, Berry Bros' promise is illusory, a promise given as consideration that does not actually obligate it to anything. Also, the UCC requires that reasonable notification must be provided before termination of a contract if its enforcement would be unconscionable, a contract which is so outrageous or immoral that it shocks the court's sensibility. A cancellation of its berry supply with no notice could put Smoothie City out of business, an unconscionable result. Question 449. Net income shows up in which kind of statement? A. Escrow closing statement. B. Profit and loss statement. C. Capital expenditures statement. D. Loan application statement. Correct answer is B. Profit and loss statement. Escrow closing statement details the financial transactions involved in the closing of a real estate transaction, such as the distribution of funds and the payment of closing costs. It does not reflect ongoing income. Capital expenditures statement tracks investments in long-term assets, such as buildings or equipment. It is not designed to show net income. Loan application statement provides information about an individual's or business's financial status to a lender for the purposes of a loan application. It may include income information, but it is not specifically a net income statement. Profit and loss statement, P&L, also known as an income statement, the profit and loss statement shows a company's or property's revenues, expenses, and net income, or loss, over a specific period. Net income is the bottom line of the statement, calculated by subtracting total expenses from total revenues. Question 450. Which of the following individuals can lawfully enter into a binding contract to buy property? A. A ward of the court. B. A foreign investor. C. An unemancipated minor. D. None of the above. Correct answer is B. A foreign investor. A ward of the court is someone under the court's care and may have limitations on their ability to enter into contracts, especially regarding property. They might need court approval for such transactions. An unemancipated minor is a person under age 21 who has never been married or who has been married but had the marriage annulled, and who remains under the control of his parents, whether or not he or she lives with them. Unemancipated minors typically cannot enter into binding contracts by self, including those involving property purchase. Foreign investors can generally purchase property in the United States, and their contracts to buy property would be considered lawful, assuming they meet other legal requirements, e.g., following money laundering regulations.